Hello there ladies and gentlemen, I'm Paul TX141 Walsh and welcome to an all new World of Warships gameplay. In this episode I'll be sailing out in the Tier 7 British free experience battleship known as the Nelson in a Tier 7 Domination match on the map Trident. Whilst I am joined by my good friend Ben, called sign Lamari, who is sailing in the Tier 7 British premium battleship known as the Hood, the overall premise of this gameplay is focused on my ship. To elaborate, I aim to make the most out of the Nelson's Super Hill Repair Party consumable in order to assist my team in holding on to the capture points. As I analyse the gameplay, I would like to draw your attention to two main areas for discussion. Number 1, using the Repair Party consumable to heal as much health as possible, balancing this with the need to avoid putting my ship dangerously close to death. And number 2, positioning my battleship defensively to draw enemy fire, while simultaneously avoiding being caught in a crossfire so I can maximise my survivability. With the forward covered, let us get into the gameplay. As we load into today's game, the first thing that comes to my mind is where am I going to position my ship to have an effective impact on the outcome of the game from the very start. And I have to keep in mind one of the weaknesses of the Nelson, as highlighted last time out, in that she lacks the top speed to quickly rotate around the map, only coming in at 24 knots. We will need to make our rotations around the map at close range, keeping towards the centre with the 3 points on display in this domination match. So we cannot afford to push aggressively through Alpha to the extent that we go charging into the enemy spawn, or through Charlie in the same regard. We cannot play off wide on those objectives, i.e. down the 1-2, alternatively the 9-10 lines, simply because we'll be out of the fight. And on top of that, as we go to the longer and longer engagement ranges, ideally say if we're in the 1-2 line, firing our guns towards ships in objectives Bravo or Charlie, we may be able to reach those ships with our 18.2km gun range, but three factors really come into effect. Dispersion, with our max range dispersion here being 225 metres, and dispersion can be nasty or can be very nice. Secondly, the fact that we're going to have to continuously make sure to provide the right amount of lead, and when targets get further and further away, this can be much more difficult. And third and finally, the fact that we have to consider that our foe at a given instance may decide to completely change their directionality or their speed, reacting to our incoming fire thanks to priority target and looking towards us, or alternatively by reacting to something that we haven't seen but is important to them at the time. Perhaps they've got a destroyer rushing them. And all three of those factors can combine together to lead to us completely missing the target, or alternatively they don't come together at all and we hit the target and absolutely rip them to shreds. But it's an unreliable experience, one could argue. So instead we want to keep our opponents at closer ranges, 12 kilometers or less, and we can start to limit all three of those factors coming together. 15 kilometers if needs be, as we're trying to get between the objectives, but because we're going to be positioning ourselves centrally, it means that those 15 kilometer engagements aren't going to last too long, and are really an interlude where we can do out a little bit of damage, but not as reliably as the damage we want to deal, which will be the main focus of our time, those 12 kilometers or less engagements. Now what am I going to do in terms of overall positioning? Well, I've already made my decision, I'm going towards Objective Alpha, but I'm not committing to Alpha until I have more information, and that's going to be afforded to me by our friendly Algeria and Icarus. Is the enemy team pushing Alpha aggressively, or are they just sending a small force, or are they not bothering at all? If the enemy team is pushing Alpha aggressively, I will dedicate myself to that objective and then make a quick flank through the objective upon a successful takeover of Alpha, going via grid square Foxtrot 4 and rotating around into the southwestern flank of Bravo to push the enemy ships out of that objective and take it for our team. Alternatively, if the enemy team does not commit to Objective Alpha, then what I'll do is position myself in grid square Echo 5 and look into Bravo, or at least the northern side of Bravo, and also traverse my guns to look across Objective Charlie and the southern approach to that objective, going out to longer ranges, but I can continuously distribute fire amongst the two objectives. So I've given myself options. I can choose to have a high impact early on Objective Alpha, or I can choose to have a more continuous flowing impact on objectives Bravo and Charlie, and it's going to be a reaction to what's happening at Alpha. In the meantime, talking about those longer range engagements, I'm just simply throwing high explosive towards the enemy Nice Alpha a bit in order to try and set some fires on their ship or break some modules and frustrate them, start to bleed down a little bit of health. And perhaps we'll even have the opportunity to trigger their damage control party consumable early on, and they may need that later, but they won't have it available when they get hit by a torpedo or another set of fires from our ships down on the eastern side of the map. You never know. A bit of indirect teamwork, if you will. But looking at the information conferred on the minimap now, I can see that the majority of the enemy team are making a very gradual movement towards the southeastern corner of the map and are perhaps getting ready to make a major push through Charlie. The enemy's destroyers are both located around Objective Bravo and they're bullying our friendly Bataan, more on that in a second, and the enemy team has only sent 2 cruisers by the looks of things, 3 at the most towards Objective Alpha, and I'm really not needed there, what with Ben charging towards it, our Icarus, our Normandy, our Algerie, and by the looks of things our Omaha pulling slightly back but also contributing to the fight there. So my focus is rotating towards Objective Bravo and go for that continuous damage output position, looking across Bravo and Charlie. And as we take Charlie as well, what this means is now the enemy team has a central position which they can exploit. And I'm trying to set my ship up as bait here. Now look at what's happening to our Bataan right now over towards the northwestern side of Charlie. They've been rather aggressive and they've gone toe to toe with the 2 enemy destroyers and they're getting caught in a storm of torpedoes heading towards them, and they'll take considerable damage to the point that it's going to take them out of the game. Now the thing is with these 2 destroyers, they're getting rather confident, I would argue, from my perspective, my understanding, trying to analyse the mentality of my opponents here. In that they're taking our Bataan apart, they haven't really got anything countering their position in Bravo. And look at what our team's doing. Based on the information perhaps afforded to those destroyers, they're thinking right now, well, this Nelson was parking up towards the northwestern side of Objective Bravo, surely he's by himself now, right? Well, the Jervis actually providing the spotting, and conversely they do not have last standby looks of things, so they've drifted out to their smoke and we can really rip into them with some high explosive. But still, the enemy Hatsuharu can think to themselves, well, what if I charge towards that Nelson right now and go for a torpedo rush? Surely I can absolutely cripple that battleship. So that's what I'm getting ready for right now. You'll see that I've slowed myself down and I'm actually putting myself in reverse already because I want to bait that Hatsuharu to come out of its smokescreen and go for me when I haven't got any effective cruiser cover. The nearest cruiser that can actually see these destroyers is the Königsberg, which is off to my port side at the moment, and I would estimate at a distance of say 12 kilometers. I mean, they cannot reliably hit those destroyers compared to what I can do. So I can hit the Jervis one more time and set a fire, they're going to burn to death. And this Hatsuharu coming around, we're already reversing, and with the amount of broadside they're given and the fact that guns are not being fired, that's an indicator torpedoes are in the water. And now they're firing their guns and angling their ship in towards us, we can say, right, torpedoes must be in the water, get ready to see them. And right on call, here's the torpedoes, and by reversing early on, it means I'm only going to take 1 torpedo hit rather than multiple. Now I'm not worried about taking a torpedo hit, because in return I can hit just as hard and rip that destroyer out of the game for a devastating strike. And that's 2 destroyer kills in a very short period of time. And we're only 5.5 minutes into the game, and the enemy team has now effectively lost its best pairs of eyes, in that we have destroyers still, they do not. And what this also means now is I can tell our Icarus, right, go for Objective Bravo. And I want to point this out as a point of discussion around destroyer players. Sometimes destroyers do not feel confident in being able to push an objective early on in terms of knife fighting, and I completely understand that. Not everyone is willing to get aggressive early on in the game, and what our Icarus can do is now move into Bravo, I'll happily support them, and they can take that objective using their concealment, and I'll bait the fire towards me, and help speed up that capture process to release them somewhere else on the map to provide vision, or alternatively start stealth torpedo an enemy ship, or just get a little bit aggressive and use some smoke, whatever they wish to do. But in the opening stages, the Icarus has helped to provide information for our team. And that's something important as well. Destroyers are not just about contesting caps, they also provide information that can give your team the edge in being able to shoot first at the enemy team, but I digress. Now coming back to what we're personally doing. Pushing in towards Objective Bravo, you'll note that I'm not being too fast in going forward because I don't want to overextend into this objective. I'm wary of the fact that what I'm doing now is actually setting myself up to position myself in a crossfire. We have the enemy ships down south of Bravo, and we also have the enemy ships going through Charlie. Now I would reckon, or I would argue, that the enemy ships in Charlie are not going to be too engrossed in my ship right now, but they will be shortly, noticing that my Nelson is positioned, so awkwardly perhaps, but I'm angling to counter the incoming fire, particularly from the enemy Nagato in the south. Now it may be the case that the enemy ships in the south are more focused on our ships coming through Objective Alpha. It depends on which ships they decide to fire on. That was the Graf Space Armour Piercing coming towards us, they're looking towards us at the moment. But we seem to, at the moment, be playing it right and position ourselves between the 2 sets of the enemy fleet that are gradually converging together looking at the minimap, and we're not taking too much incoming fire. And we're helping to speed up this capture process as highlighted before, and we're getting ready to start reversing out. At the same time, this is setting us up nicely to deploy our second repair party consumable. And this is where I want to come on to the special repair party consumable afforded to the Nelson compared to the other battleships at her tier. Because the ability to heal at 28,500 health per heal with the healing flags on the Nelson is unique. That's a lot of health to heal in a single heal over 20 seconds. And when you first get the ship, or a ship with a super heal, you can feel invulnerable thanks to these types of heals, in the fact that you can just simply take a huge amount of damage and then completely repair it, right? Well, not exactly. And talk about repairing things, that grass bait is going to need more than just one repair party consumable to get that health back, I can assure you. The difficulty is, a standard battleship heal repairs a smaller amount of health, yes, but it means that you can choose to deploy that consumable much more easily, because you only need to take a certain amount of damage, a low amount of damage, before you can choose to deploy that consumable. With a Nelson, you do not have that luxury as such, or if you decide to deploy your consumable a little bit earlier perhaps than you would want to, then you waste a lot of the consumable's value. Let me explain. When I triggered my first repair party consumable, I'd gone down to approximately half of my health, if not a little bit under that, and I got practically all of my health back, and one could say I printed a new ship. That seems to be the running phrase. It's fine on the first consumable because we took a good chunk of fire damage, which will heal 100% of fire, flooding and ramming damage, and will heal 60% of regular penetration, over penetration and torpedo damage to non-citadel areas. So we took that torpedo on the bow of our ship, that's a non-citadel area as I remember correctly, and therefore we could heal 60% of that. The difficulty is when we take citadel damage or torpedo damage to citadel areas, we'll only heal 10% of that damage. Now you can set up your ship to take a certain type of damage early on because the engagements are not too heavily developed, but as time goes on you'll be exposed to those situations where you'll take damage that you can only heal 60% of, or you can only heal 10% of, even if you play perfectly. And as that time goes on, what one has to consider is each time you get ready for the next repair party consumable, as we've deployed our second one now, the threshold for you to trigger that consumable becomes lower in your remaining health pool. In the case of the first heal, we could say it was in the region of 30,000 HP. For the second one, we could say that it's been in the region of, say, 20,000 HP. For the third one, if we go by the logic of taking off 28,500 health each time, well, let's say 30,000. With our current health state of 47,000, we need to be down to 17,000 HP. With the final one, if we take a couple of 10% of hits, i.e. ones that we can only heal 10% of, we're most likely going to be in the region of, say, 1,000 to 7,000 HP to get that final heal off and get the most out of it, depending on how well we can manage the incoming damage. And this puts you in a vulnerable state of risk versus reward. Are you willing to take the risk over time of continuously letting your health get extremely low, so that way you can reward yourself by completely topping your health up and printing a new ship? And what you'll see is, so far with the first two hills, I've been successful in doing that because the risk is not too significant and I haven't been overextending into the enemy team. I've been positioning myself such to have that continuous impact, but at the same time not having multiple guns thrown my way. Alternatively, just simply garnering the attention of so many ships as to make it very difficult for me to be able to repair my ship and offset the incoming damage, because sometimes you'll trigger this heal whilst you're taking damage because you know you can offset the incoming damage. As we're getting down to less and less ships on our team now, we can see that the enemy team has really taken a foothold on Objective Charlie and we now have to play defensively. We are going to have to tank damage for our team because we're one of only 2 battleships left and our Normandy's all the way down on the southern periphery of the map. I mean, they're not going to be able to draw as much attention, I would argue, as what we're going to be drawing very shortly. And it's as we draw the greater amount of attention that knowing when to deploy the repair party consumable here really has a spot of difficulty. Because if this was a standard repair party consumable, well, we'll take a bit of damage and we can immediately trigger that heal because the trigger threshold is so much lower, i.e. the amount of health you have to lose before you trigger it. In the case of Nelson, that threshold is so much higher and it brings in the added risk immediately. So you'll see what I'm doing, I'm starting to reverse myself off of Objective Bravo. Not too far. I'm actually starting to come to a halt for a little bit, but I want to be in that position whereby I can simply be there to start drawing the attention with our ships going quite heavily forward, our artillery fall into the guns, the Goulet Césaire. But I want to be in that position whereby I can take that attention, but I can also act to defend the objectives because we want to continuously bring about the points. 6 points every couple of seconds is going to make the difference over time, even as our team loses more and more ships perhaps. And here I'm just trying to judge what the Nagato is doing in terms of movement to throw in a high explosive salvo, again being able to set fires and bleed off some of their health and perhaps bite into while they repair party consumables is going to be a little bit more useful than hoping for a reliable armour piercing citadel salvo or just one that gets a good amount of penetration. Nonetheless, having done that damage to the Nagato, I'm now starting to move a little bit further forward because what I've realised is, okay, the enemy team is actually taking its time to come out of Charlie and they're not immediately coming from Charlie towards Bravo. If anything, they're actually directing themselves northwards out of the objective and then gradually turning their ships counterclockwise around the map, which means they'll be more spread out as they come from that objective. And even then, I have to consider right now, how do I manage that situation? Because when enemy ships spread out, what that means is the avenue of fire against your battleship, talking about tanking damage here in a battleship, becomes wider. And what it means is you cannot as easily angle your ship to bounce armor piercing shells reliably, as we take a good amount of armor piercing damage there from the enemy Nagato, but it was only 10,000 rather than say 20,000 because we'd angled our bow towards them. Not the best of angles perhaps, but we did reasonably well. Now the importance of this is in the case of Nelson, she only has 25mm of bow armor, and on top of that, her bow armor is not too strong. And the citadel of the ship, in my experience, rides rather high, leading to sometimes the awkward situation where you get citadeled through the bow of the ship, or you take increasingly lethal penetration damage through the bow of the ship, despite the fact you angled it appropriately. Nonetheless, as we take some more damage there from some armor piercing via the enemy battleships, probably the Nagato again, we're now pulling back and we trigger our third super hill. And what we can see is with all the high explosive damage coming in and the fire that's been set on our ship, we can get a good chunk of this health back. And it's not as though we're going to have wasted this hill, because we triggered it as we're still taking damage, which means any health that we've perhaps not been ready to repair is going to be put into that repair state as the damage comes in. And we only lost out approximately 2 seconds of the hill there, which is not too much in the great scheme of things. It's something that we've lost, but that equates to roughly 3,000 health. So we got back at least 25,000 there, which we can be happy with. And as we pull further and further back right now, we're trying to make sure we manage the amount of attention we've got on our ship. Because whilst the super hill is down, it's an 80-second reload. It means that the enemy team have the opportunity now to really ramp up the damage output on our ship and try to bring us down. And by pulling back gradually and giving the ground on objective Bravo, we're not completely surrendering it, because the enemy team still isn't taking it and our team's still holding the points advantage despite having considerably less ships. What it means is we're still ahead in the game for this time. And the enemy team still needs to deal with the fact that they only have one objective, and there's still a Nelson holding its position as the defender of objective Alpha. And by surrendering Bravo now, we can see that the enemy Leon most likely has got into objective Bravo, where the enemy team not having any destroyers and so many ships concentrated up north. With the Leon pushing through, we now have to get into a position whereby, right, we need to set up a funnel, and it really is a case of hold to the last objective, hold to the very end, and make sure that the enemy team cannot get through your ship to get to Alpha and win the game. Because the rest of our teammates, no criticism of them, just looking at things impassionately, they are positioned off of the objective, which means we are the only ship that, in a way, is blocking the progress towards the objective right now. We are getting supporting fire from our Nürnberg on the enemy Giulio Cesar, and our Akatsuki most likely is tossing torpedoes, you can see them right there, but they're not in that position to draw the attention. We are the focal point of the enemy's attention now, we are the focal point of the defence. When the enemy Leon coming through, I've already switched targets to the Leon because I can see they're given a full broadside, and despite our armour piercing not doing as well as against battleship armour compared to the other armour piercing available for battleships at our tier, it's a trait of the British battleship armour piercing if I remember correctly, we can still look towards this Leon as we take another considerable hit from their multiple guns, and we can rip into that broadside with our armour piercing. And through that exposure we pick up 18,000 damage. Now looking at our health pool at this point, you can see that the amount of health we have available to heal is not too great. It looks in the region of say 10,000 to 15,000 right now. So we're nowhere near our threshold for triggering the repair party consumable. But I'm getting worried at this point because I know it's only going to take one very good armour piercing salvo from those enemy battleships or a mix-up of damage from the enemy battleship and the enemy cruisers in order to put me out. And I triggered the repair party consumable there prematurely, thinking the Leon was going to do considerable damage against my broadside, but they underled the salvo, meaning that it completely missed, and as a result of that I did not take the damage I anticipated, and this is why I've actually thrown away around 6 seconds of this repair party consumable. Now is that going to come back to haunt me? We'll have to see. Because by losing that, that's approximately, if I remember correctly, what would be, let's just say, 9,000 to 10,000 health lost there on the repair. As a result of that, I don't have that health anymore, and with our repair party consumables now expired, it means we are just down to our last bit of health. We've tanked a lot of damage, but we still need to tank the remaining damage in order to keep our team in this game and win. Now, we're reversing to create a funnel effect here, because you know the enemy ships now will have to push, if they want to come towards us even further, through a lane around objective Alpha on the northeastern side. But if the enemy ships decide to pull off this objective, such as Leon, and instead give broadside, that's perfect for us. But if the enemy team wants to concentrate all their fire, they'll have to concentrate it down a single angle, and we can angle our ship appropriately to bounce that incoming fire, with the Nürnberg tossing in armour piercing salvo after armour piercing salvo when perhaps they should be firing high explosive, and we're bouncing the vast majority of that. The Nagato hits us an armour piercing salvo, it's not enough to kill us off, and we only need to take one enemy ship down now or hold on just a little bit longer to survive. The Nürnberg's armour piercing doesn't get through our ship too well there. We're down to our last 651 health. Can we hold on? Will that armour piercing bounce? We just need to connect with one shell on this Leon. Can we do it? Bingo! Well, that was an extremely close match, but in the end our team prevailed. As for our battle performance, our damage output came to a total of 161,046 HP. Along the way we picked up 5 achievements, reading from left to right. The standard achievement of Devastating Strike, awarded for destroying an enemy ship with a single artillery salvo, torpedo salvo, or aircraft by causing damage in excess of 50% of the destroyed ship's normal health pool. This was secured on the enemy Hatsuharu. Next, the heroic achievement of Confederate, awarded for damage at least 6 enemy ships where damage caused to each ship must exceed 20% of their normal health pool. Then the standard achievement of Fireproof, awarded for receiving damage caused by a fire that exceeds 40% of our ship's normal health pool and survive the battle. Following that, the heroic achievement of Dreadnought, awarded for receiving damage exceeding 120% of our ship's normal health pool from 4 or more enemy ships and survive the battle. And finally, the heroic achievement of High Caliber, awarded for damage at least 4 enemy ships where damage caused must exceed 30% of the total health pool of all the ships in the enemy team. Moving on to the team scores, we can see that we topped the team by a considerable margin in terms of base experience earned, with 2,386. Our row over the course of this game was focused on controlling the capture points, particularly Bravo and to a lesser extent Alpha. In the first half of the game, we recognised that Nelson's lack of speed would handicap our ability to keep pace with the forward elements of our team, such as Ben's Hood, that push through Alpha. Instead, having observed that our team had taken Alpha and Charlie, whilst the enemy team had taken Bravo, we decided to position our ship northwest of Bravo to counter the possibility of the enemy using Bravo to launch a central push. This came to fruition with us shutting down the push made by the enemy destroyers, giving our friendly Icarus, the Tier 6 British destroyer, the opportunity to take Bravo with us in support. At the same time, we noted the start of the enemy's main push with their capture of Charlie as our team took Bravo. This led to us transitioning into a defensive role for the second half of the game, aiming to slow the enemy's push towards Bravo and then Alpha. We achieved this by number 1, putting our ship into reverse to prevent receiving more damage than our super heal could repair. Number 2, using a landmass off to the starboard side of our ship to cover our flank and funnel the incoming fire towards our angled bow, allowing us to bounce a considerable number of armor-piercing shells from the enemy battleships. And number 3, avoiding target fixation, with the aim of prioritising those ships showing their broadsides first to deal maximum damage to our own artillery pieces. As for our detailed report, we can quantify the amount of tanking we achieved in the Nelson through 2 statistics. Firstly, the potential damage we received of 4,036,800 HP. By drawing this amount of attention towards our ship, it may be the case that some of our allies were able to receive less attention from the enemy team, thereby helping to keep them alive and further contribute to the outcome of the match. Secondly, the actual damage we received of 156,066 HP. This is 90% of our maximum potential health pool of 173,400 based on the application of Superintendent to give us a full repair party consumable and also the heal flags. This meant we did well to get the most out of each repair party consumable, albeit I would argue that I triggered my final repair party too early, which led to my ship being on its final 651 HP at the very end. However, this also goes to show the more risky nature of the Nelson Super Heal, in that you have to let your HP drop far more to get the most out of it, unlike with the standard repair party consumables afforded to the other Tier 7 battleships. Finally, coming on to credits and experience earned, we can see that after additions and deductions, we took away 525,639 silver credits and 5,369 commander experience. In conclusion, I believe today's gameplay has demonstrated how powerful the Nelson Super Heal variant of the repair party consumable can be in enabling her to tank an extreme amount of damage for her team. This particularly came to light in the second half of the game, where we acted as the focal point for defending against the enemy's push towards Bravo and Alpha. However, we did not solely rely on the Super Heal to offset the incoming damage. We also applied the concept of covering our flanks to ensure that the enemy fire only came from one direction. Combining this with angling our ship's armour to reduce the damage we received from armour-piercing shells, especially from the enemy battleships. In the end, victory became a matter of survival, and our bruised and battered Nelson held on just long enough. With that, I've been TX141. If you've enjoyed this video, why not leave a like, comment or subscribe for future World of Warships videos on my channel. Additionally, if you do not currently play World of Warships but are thinking of now giving this highly enjoyable game a try, you can sign up today using the link in the video description. Alas, that is all I've got time for today, ladies and gentlemen. Until next time, as always, I bid you fair winds and following seas.